Formula One on 5 Live.
F1 is back. The summer holiday is over and we are ready to go racing again. It's been 25 days since the Belgian Grand Prix. Can't believe it. It's flown by. But actually, I think we all needed a bit of a rest, a bit of a holiday, because the first half of the season has been pretty frenetic and exciting, I will say. 14 races down. And this weekend, the 15th race will take place at the Zandvoort circuit here in Holland. We're in Max Verstappen's home territory. What will that mean for the Dutchman? And the circuit itself is nestled in the sand dunes overlooking the North Sea, and as I'm standing here talking to you, it's pretty blustery, I have to say, and a little bit chilly, so we're going to have to keep an eye on the weather over the course of the weekend. And joining me to preview what might or might not happen this weekend in the Netherlands is the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, and the former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer. And guys, do you like to be beside the seaside?
I do. Palmer?
Yeah, it's like a summer's day in Norfolk, isn't it? The Norfolk coast. We're just over the North Sea.
I feel at home.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
I love the fact we got the train here this morning and walked in. I quite like the fact that it sort of feels like you're kind of ambling in
from
and
Amsterdam.
There's a racetrack.
From Amsterdam, not from Norfolk.
No, no.
Just to be clear.
It's home comforts, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a murky grey sea, huge load of wind, but it's what we're used to. It's nice.
Andrew Benson, you just arrived and you were like, I don't really like it here. So is it because you've got the blues after
he's munching on a stroopwafel as well, we must add.
An epic holiday in Puglia, or is it just because it's a bit bleak and a bit... What did you say earlier when you sent us a photo to our group WhatsApp of the beach? You said, was it ominous? No, gloomy?
Blustery. Yeah,
blustery.
I was in Liguria.
You were in Liguria, sorry, not Puglia. Ritzy.
I don't not like it. It's just, I think... Logistically, it's a bit of a challenge, right? This race, I think you know what I'm talking about, getting in and out and all the rest of it. But I'm not complaining, you know. We're very privileged to be here, just to be clear about that.
Are you cycling in? Anyone?
I'd like to.
I did think we should. I was like, maybe producer Paddy, we should get together and think about how we're going to get into the circuit. Should we rent some bikes?
When this race came on the calendar, I thought I want to stay in Haarlem, rent a bike, and ride in.
Yeah.
I can't stay in Haarlem because all the hotels are booked, so we're in Amsterdam.
You want to stay on Zandvoort Beach? It's lovely.
Yeah, well,
it's lovely. Just a short walk onto the coast.
We can't all get the journey in Palmer Suites.
Palmer is the height of privilege.
I still
obviously.
want a bike to get in. It's a 1.5k walk.
It's a little blustery as well. So, what are we thinking then this weekend? What comes to mind when you think of the Netherlands, Harry? Max Verstappen? No.
Well, if you're here in Zandvoort, it's techno music, isn't it? It's blasting from the grandstands across
he's
the whole
so
weekend.
Gen Z.
Yeah, or a stroopwafel, which is right in front of me. I mean, they're pretty go-to ones.
How good are Netherlands at sport? This is what I decided over the summer. Their Olympics was unbelievable for a country this size. Their football team's pretty great for a country this size. They've got Max Verstappen. They're ticking the sports boxes at the moment, aren't they?
They are. The cycling is obviously one of their major sports. Field hockey as well. I think they're pretty good at throughout the Olympics.
Rowing.
They've got the leverage. The leverage.
400 metres.
Oh, you are. Did you enjoy the Olympics then? You got Olympic fever. You got the come
really
down after it.
I got majorly into it. That's the best thing about having a summer break when the Olympics is on and you have a few weeks to just nose out in front of the telly. Tune into all sorts of Olympic sports that I wouldn't normally watch.
You were actually there, right?
I went.
Yeah. Why did you go?
Skin in the game, I hear.
My soon-to-be sister-in-law was competing in the Olympics, and I saw her get to the Olympic final at the 1500 metres, and then I didn't see her get a bronze medal. I was on the way home. Didn't think she'd make it. But
No thanks.
no thanks.
But what's better, bronze or 6th place in Singapore?
6th place in Singapore.
Yeah, obviously. Correct
Never
answer.
taking that away.
Every time.
But Georgia Bell did very well.
Yeah, big shout out. Well done. Unbelievable. To come home with a medal. Just a shame you didn't see it, Jolyon. Right, well, we've got plenty coming up on the show. Andrew is going to sit down with McLaren boss Zak Brown, and he's going to tell us that even he has been surprised by the competitiveness of the team of late. Carlos Sainz explains why he's decided to join Williams for 2025. And what does the latest high-profile exit from Red Bull mean for the team? It's been a busy 2024 for them, hasn't it? But first, guys, before we get into it, a little bit of a half-term report. I know we're not technically halfway through, we're a little bit more than halfway through. What do you think? Has it been a shot in the arm to Formula One this season? Because it's been a bit monotonous, hasn't it, with the Red Bull and Max Verstappen domination. But suddenly we've got other drivers winning, and it's much needed, I think.
Yeah, okay, I think that's fair to say. First few races, after Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, I think we're all thinking it's a little bit bleak here. But it has come alive in the last few rounds. Verstappen and Red Bull have actually been on the back foot. Red Bull don't have two drivers that are capable of scoring good points at the moment. Sergio Perez, the other driver, that's a whole other story we'll come on to. But you've got McLaren, who have, if they had this form that they're currently experiencing at the start of the year, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri would be in the fight for the driver's title alongside Max Verstappen. They are absolutely in the fight for the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes have refound their form after years of being lost. They seem to have been revitalised. Ferrari started well, slipped back a bit, but they're still dicing up there. It's a really good battle at the moment. Formula One's in a really good place, I think.
This actually could be one of the seasons for the ages. Always my metric is when my non-F1 mates text me about what's going on in Formula One.
Yeah.
When they're texting saying, what's going on about Russell in Spa? That was an amazing drive. But
what does underweight mean?
Yeah,
like,
1.5 kilos doesn't seem like much. And, they love getting into the technicals of it, which is always is a great thing for the sport. And it's deserved because it's been really competitive this year. We absolutely have a constructors' fight on our hands. Tenuously, the Drivers' Championship fight's not over, but if that was to somehow kick on, and it needs Verstappen to have a couple of DNFs realistically, but if that somehow got more tasty towards the end of the year, this would be one of the best seasons ever.
Yeah, it's just a shame the season didn't start in Miami rather than in Bahrain, isn't it, given the competitiveness that's been since then. It's interesting looking at the points. In the last 5 races, the highest scoring driver is Lewis Hamilton, who's obviously got 2 wins, and Mercedes has been on the podium, I think, pretty much every race since then. And then followed by Oscar Piastri, and only then Verstappen. But I think it says quite a lot about the quality of Verstappen's season that even going through this struggle that Red Bull have been through, even not having won a race since Spain in the middle of May, he's still the 3rd highest scoring driver in that series of races, one of which he had a crash in. Okay, finished after the crash, but still.
That's the thing, and that's why you feel like it's still Verstappen's, because everyone else is sharing out the wins very nicely, and Max is fighting for pretty much every single win.
And he's got a massive lead.
And a bad day's a podium, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he's still the man to beat, and we're in his home territory, but loving the season.
And it has been Lando Norris and McLaren, who, admittedly, Lando Norris has made a few mistakes here and there, so there could have been some even better results for him over the course of the season. But there have been surprises. Do we think there are going to be surprises for this next part of the season, or does it become a bit too difficult for some big scalps and things like that?
I don't think anyone new is going to win a race, but I think the race victories are going to get shared. I'd be very surprised if the race victories aren't shared out between the same drivers who've already won races. The only question is who's going to win how many and where. This race has been owned by Verstappen since it came back on the calendar, which is kind of appropriate. It's only 3 years, but it's kind of appropriate because the race only exists because of Max Verstappen. If he wasn't in Formula 1, we wouldn't even be here. But is that going to be the case this weekend? Red Bull are a little bit lost, I think. There's talk about them reverting the car to a previous specification potentially. We don't know yet because the cars haven't appeared properly yet this weekend. McLaren have an upgrade this weekend. I'm told it's not as big as the upgrade they had in Miami, but it is the first upgrade since Miami. And I think that's quite telling because they've been saying that they've been trying not to put upgrades on the car because they weren't completely sure that they were going to perform in the way they expected. We've seen Ferrari, for example, fall foul of that. So there's a lot of things to happen over the next 10 races, and I think it should be, in theory, every single one of them should be a banger.
At the moment, Max Verstappen has 277 points. He leads the championship. Lando Norris on 199. Let's hear how Lando assesses his season so far.
I mean, I'm second in the championship, so that's why I have the best chance. But also as a team, I think we've been on average the best scoring team over the last few races, and the team have done an amazing job to help us achieve this. But also from my side, I've been the closest to Max consistently, but I've not been close enough. He still managed to pull away in the championship over the last few races, and it's clear that I've had to improve, and I needed to improve on some areas. I'm hoping over the summer that the stuff I looked into, the stuff we try to work on, improves now in the second half of the season. Because competing against Max and competing against Red Bull is just a very high level, and it's not just a high level one race and then maybe not so much. It's every single race needs to be at the very best, and I think that's what Max and Red Bull can do so well, and it's not what I've done so well over the last few races before the shutdown. So some things I've needed to improve on, and hopefully I've improved, and I can prove that this weekend.
You've been very self-critical, Lando, but the media have been very critical of the team in terms of how they've been fighting at the front. Some people are saying that maybe McLaren don't know how to fight at the front anymore. You've taken time to reflect over the summer. How do you think the team should have been reflecting on their performance thus far, and how do they need to improve to make sure you can fight Max right the way to the end of the season?
They're all wrong. The team are doing an amazing job. From where we were last year to where we are now is 1 point. But of course, where we are now and performing against the best other teams is also another point. And obviously and clearly, we've not done the best job, and there's been things we've needed to do better on. But we know that. We don't need everyone else to say that on the outside. I'm still very happy with how the team have been performing. I think we've still been outperforming and done a better job than majority of other teams, but we also know that we're not the happiest with outperforming the majority. We want to outperform everyone, and consistently, which is probably the bigger factor of it all. So I'm very happy. People can say what they want on the outside, but inside the team and the mentality inside the team is very strong. Everyone's very motivated, and we just keep doing what we're doing because we're improving. We know we have work to do, but we keep our heads down and keep doing what we're doing.
That was Lando talking to me earlier. Andrew, they've been the best performing team, I'd say, but still not actually performing at their best. Would you agree?
Well, I think they would agree. The car has been the consistently best car. It hasn't been the fastest, really, at that many races, apart from maybe Hungary definitively. For an entire weekend, in terms of domination, but they've definitely been the most consistently high-level performing team. And I think that's why it's a little bit surprising that they've only won 2 races all year, one each for Norris and Piastri. And Norris was more critical of himself with the written media after your interview with him, Rosanna. He was talking about not having been driving in the first part of the season at the level of a world champion. A lot of the time he said he had been, but there's been some crucial mistakes, mainly around starts and first laps, even if they're only small mistakes. Like, he's made a good start, but not quite a good enough start as someone else, and then he lost a race in Spain, for example, because of that. Or he made an error like he did on the first lap in Spa, on the exit of the first corner. All of those things have compromised his season, and in that run of drivers that I'm talking about, he's actually quite low down in terms of the top 5 drivers in the championship. He's the second worst scoring driver over the last 5 races of those top 5.
Austria hit him hard, didn't it, in that, because that was one that got away, as did Hungary was another one, started on pole and didn't convert it, and his teammate beat him, and there was that team orders debacle. Silverstone, he should have had a home win, but the team got the strategy wrong. So many things have not gone right for Norris, but for McLaren, at least, if they have an upgrade, the last one worked wonders, so it doesn't need to be the same level to bring them to the front.
Well, they're already the fastest car on average, so
exactly.
Over the last few races, so if they've got an upgrade on that, then in theory they should be even further ahead.
But what's quite nice is when we say they're the fastest car, the averages are tiny though, aren't they? It's 100th that you're looking into here or there, or race pace versus qualifying pace, because it's very rare that you have a definitive best car on any weekend. And even in Belgium, when Mercedes probably the 3rd best car over the weekend, and yet Lewis Hamilton took a win, George Russell pretty much led them to a 1-2. It changes so quickly.
But that's why this is probably such a crucial time for McLaren and Lando Norris. Look, this is not the first time we've seen Norris make mistakes. Dare I go back to Sochi a couple of years ago, when you suddenly find Norris in the position to be challenging consistently. Look, there's no doubt he's one of the best drivers on the grid, and he can do it. Of course he can. But it is those little mistakes that set race winners, consistently championship contenders apart. And I think he's increasingly having a problem on his hands with the guy in the other seat, in Oscar Piastri, who has outscored him in the last 5 races, who won that race in Hungary, who has been consistently up there. It's brilliant for McLaren to be able to strive the team forward, but Norris has, I think, got to start laying claim to being the number one more definitively.
Interesting revelation from Piastri as well today. He on his Instagram account a few days ago, he said he had a broken rib. He didn't give any more details. Turns out it broke in Austria, and he's been driving with it since then. It's now all healed, but he said it was really uncomfortable.
So you want to race with a broken rib?
You want to race with a broken
That's
rib.
Pretty cool.
Although he did say it was getting better by Hungary, but Silverstone apparently was really, really painful. And I think Jolien can probably give us an idea what it might be like to drive a Formula 1 car with a broken rib, even though you've probably never done it yourself.
Yeah, I've driven a Formula 1 car with damaged ribs, and it is sore, and it was at Spa. And these are like long, some of the fastest long-loaded corners, like Pouhon at Spa, you go through. It's the double left-hander in the middle of the circuit, and you just put so much G through your body. If you've got a damaged rib, that's where you're so hunkered down. The squash effect is pretty big. So he did a very good job. He must have not been in too much pain in reality to do that, what he did at Silverstone, all those races, and take the win.
But do you think psychologically for Norris to hear that or know about it, do you think that has any kind of
This is what F1 drivers do. This is like hero stuff. It's gladiator stuff. It's what it's meant to be about, like Mark Webber throwing up in his helmet in Japan in 2007.
If I can do that with a broken rib, you guys are in big trouble now. Nah, come on. He delivered at such a high level, it's hard to imagine that there's more that he could have done without a broken rib. He must have just driven around it stoically. I think the bigger thing for me on McLaren is the strategy, because I think they've missed quite a few races, or they've missed optimising what they did on strategy, including the 1-2 that I think they really mishandled, and the team orders debacle ensued. But even in the last race, Norris was beaten by Verstappen, and he really needn't have been. McLaren they're not proactive on strategy. It's cost them wins in Canada and in Silverstone. And they need to start with 2 drivers against 1 Red Bull. They need to start being better in that department.
Well, we'll hear from Zak Brown, the team boss, a little later on in the show. But when the dust had sort of settled in Belgium after the disqualification of George Russell for the car being underweight, there were then a couple of announcements as we headed off into the summer break. Some high-profile personnel movements. Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director at Red Bull, he's going to be leaving his role there to become Audi's Formula One team principal from next year. And Carlos Sainz finally made a decision about his future, and he's going to join Williams. First, your reaction to the Jonathan Wheatley story, Andrew, because it's another big high-profile departure. Sporting director of the team, pretty instrumental, I would imagine. What's that going to do to Red Bull? Will it destabilise them at all, do you think?
Well, there's 2 aspects to it, aren't there? There's the Red Bull side of it, and then there's the Sauber Audi side of it, because it's not just him, it's Mattia Binotto who's also joining Sauber Audi, and they're going to split that role. Binotto's going to be at the factory, and Wheatley's going to be the team principal at the races, basically. In terms of Red Bull, it's a big blow. Wheatley's been there for 18 years. You know, they've got the best pit stops in the pit lane. He runs that. That's his job, among many other things. He's very highly respected. Of course, most people know about him as the voice who got into Michael Massey's head at Abu Dhabi, or before Abu Dhabi, but that enabled Abu Dhabi 2021 to happen. Verstappen's first championship against Hamilton, of course, and the controversial ending to that race. He's an incredibly effective sporting manager, and I don't believe Red Bull have got anyone who is obvious who can step up into that role. So that's a big hole for them to fill. And as you say, Rosanna, it's the second massive departure since the Christian Horner allegations that emerged in February, the female employee who accused him of sexual harassment and coercive and controlling behaviour, which he's always denied. Red Bull have had 2 internal investigations into that now. This was another thing that emerged after Spa. The second one of those was concluded, came to the same conclusion as the first and dismissed it. There's still more things to come on that, I believe, in terms of developments. It's not over yet, even though Red Bull would like it to be. Adrian Newey left as a direct consequence of that, their chief technical officer. Looks like he's probably going to end up at Aston Martin. That's the way the wind seems to be blowing at the moment. So 2 big holes to fill for Red Bull, and we don't know quite how that's going to affect them in the future. But it can't, it's not going to be easy for them to replace both of those people.
And of course, there's been chat about Max Verstappen, whether he was going to stay with the team for 2025, whether he would go elsewhere. Mercedes was one of those suggestions. So let's hear what Max Verstappen made of the news that Jonathan Wheatley will be leaving the team and joining what will become Audi in 2025.
I mean, of course, you hear about it. Even before, of course, things get announced. But at the end of the day, I have a great relationship with Jonathan, and it always will be like that anyway, even if, of course, he's moving to a different team. But it's a different opportunity for him, and also a different role. Sometimes, of course, it's also a bit of a new challenge, right? So there are no hard feelings or whatever. I'm happy for him, that he gets that opportunity. Of course, he will be missed within the team. But of course, as a team, we also have to look at the future and move on from that. And we still have to see how we're going to fill in all the roles that Jonathan currently has. But I'm also happy for him. It goes both ways. And the team is, of course, also very thankful for what he has delivered for the team. So, there are no hard feelings at all.
That was Max Verstappen. And Jolien, I guess, how much influence does a sporting director have on a driver? Do you chat with them a lot over the course of a weekend when you're not even at the race weekend?
It depends from team to team how big that role is. For me, at Renault, it was a big role. Alan Permain was the sporting director, and it was a similar role to Jonathan Wheatley, really, at Red Bull. They would be overlooking the engineering team. They'd be overlooking the pit stops, as Andrew said. They'd be speaking to the FIA. They'd be going with you if you had to go and see the stewards at all. They are sort of the centre point of performance at the track. Literally, the sporting director. So they are overseeing everything that can go right or wrong on the track. They, obviously, it gets broken down into plenty of different roles. The engineering team is made up of so many different people, but they are the linchpin at the top of it, and they coordinate things, and they do it very well if they've got the experience that Jonathan Wheatley did or does, and Alan Permain. So Alan Permain left Alpine last year, and I feel like he's a big miss even in a midfield team. So right at the top, with Adrian Newey going as well, still a lot of chatter about the driver lineup at Red Bull. It's just an extra thing that Red Bull really don't need at the moment.
Off the back of that, with somebody who's clearly so integral, and as Andrew was saying, Newey's obviously off, there is still continued talk about if Verstappen will stay, will he go, how long will he see out that contract too. Are we kind of witnessing the implosion of Red Bull as a team right now, at least slowly?
They're certainly under huge pressure in terms of some key personnel leaving. The performance of the car has plateaued. The performance of the second driver is under weekly scrutiny because Sergio Perez is not scoring a top 6 at the moment because the field's tightened up and he's a long way away from Verstappen. And this comes at the end of the most dominant era that Formula One's seen last year. So it feels like it might be coming to the sort of the end of the Roman Empire. We've got a new reg change coming in 26, which will be the biggest defining thing, if they can get through that or not.
It's worth making the point as well about Sergio Perez that the story that he was going to be kept on into the second half of the season when his job was under pressure.
There goes your street waffle, Andrew.
Yeah, I think I'm not getting any more.
He's got worse. He already wasn't enamoured with being here.
It's been misreported in certain places. People have said he's been kept. They've said he's been kept for the rest of the season. That is not what they've said. He is still under threat for his seat. He's got a number of races to prove he can still do it. He could still be replaced in the middle of this season.
He is 7th in the driver's standings at the moment, and then there was meant to be a meeting, wasn't there, on the Monday straight after Belgium, so they've alluded to the fact he's staying with them, but as you say, one to watch, and his performances are critical now, Jolyon.
Well, so he's 7th. Verstappen leads by 78 points. Verstappen's got more than double Perez's points right now, so the gulf is ginormous, and it means right now, as things stand, Red Bull are not favourites to be the Constructors' Champion, even though Verstappen is most likely going to be the Drivers' Champion. Had Russell not been disqualified from Belgium, you'd be looking at Mercedes being odds on to beat them as well, and maybe Mercedes can still do that with the performance they've got at the moment. So that's why there's such scrutiny now on Perez. The gap has been there for a couple of years, but now everyone's caught up. It's being exacerbated in terms of position, and it was back in Miami that Perez was top 6 finisher in a Formula One race. It's 8 races ago.
What does this say about the mindset of Red Bull? Because it doesn't feel like they want to be winners if they're looking at the constructors. I know Max has probably got the drivers sealed, but they're not doing everything they can, Andrew.
They've got themselves in a massive hole, haven't they? Because they announced a new 2-year contract for Perez after Monaco.
Awkward.
So yeah, just to drop him like a few races after that doesn't say a lot for the management judgment involved,
where's
does
the
it?
brutality of Red Bull that we've witnessed time and time again?
We may still see it, Harry. We may still see it.
But I think we would have already seen it if a Red Bull of old. They could have. They've got this junior team, and it is a junior team still, no matter how they label it. RB with Tsunoda and Ricciardo. No, he's not the junior driver. But we've seen in the past where they've just gotten rid of both drivers completely and put in a new blood to see if they can find their next Sebastian Vettel or whatever. Why are they not doing that?
Very briefly, they've got a problem on their hands. They don't believe in Tsunoda. He's there because of Honda. Ricciardo's not outperforming Tsunoda enough for someone they don't believe in. And Liam Lawson's only done 5 Grand Prix, and to chuck him in alongside Max Verstappen is a big ask. And they've got the Mexican Grand Prix issue coming up. What's going to happen if they dump Perez before Mexico? Is there going to be like some kind of revolution in Mexico City?
Well, the problem is they've actually got an embarrassment of riches now on their hands, because they've also got Isaac Hadjar, who's absolutely dominating Formula 2 right now. He's looking really good, and he's a Red Bull protege. So they've got Lawson. They've actually got 6 drivers for 4 seats, but they've only got 1 that they really want right now, and the other 5 is hot potato at the moment in terms of what's going to happen for the end of this year or next year. Perez is the top of that. And I feel like Red Bull have got to get Lawson and Hadjar into Formula One next year, because they obviously don't see Tsunoda or Ricciardo as a potential Perez replacement, or it would have happened. And to get both of those in, they either have to be pretty ruthless over the winter, or they need to give someone a shot against a Tsunoda or a Ricciardo in the last 10 races. They got a nice audition time in the RBs to put one of them in and just see how good maybe Tsunoda is.
What could have been such a dominant season for Red Bull with both drivers, it has just started to unravel, as you say, Harry. Is this the implosion? Yeah, great for us to have something to talk about other than like, will the weather jeopardise Max Verstappen's race this weekend?
Well, it might as well.
It may well. It's jeopardised your weekend.
We're talking about 80-kilometre-an-hour winds tomorrow.
My hair.
It's going to jeopardise my race. Commentary box will blow down.
Your short cycle from the hotel to the track is going to be treacherous.
It's a tailwind. I'm going to get a taxi back.
Former Formula One driver, of course. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz then, because actually one of those drivers that we're talking about in the Red Bull pool could have wanted to end up at Williams, because that in the years gone by has always been a good sort of seat for a junior cutting their teeth in the sport. But Carlos Sainz has opted to go there. What do we make of that news? I mean, James Vowles had been sort of openly flirting with Carlos Sainz in all the media sessions, saying how great a driver he was and wanted him at Williams, and everyone sort of realised that was where maybe he was heading. But has he missed out on an opportunity by not going for Audi, not going for Mercedes, not putting his name forward for Red Bull?
He didn't want to go to Audi. He could have done, but he chose not to. He wanted to go to Mercedes or Red Bull, but they didn't want him. So he's been left with a few mediocre options. And so he's gone with Williams, which is a nice team for Williams. Sainz and Albon, and I can see them moving forwards. James Vowles obviously at the helm, recently at the helm as well, as team principal, trying to move them forward out of Mercedes, and he's been around Toto Wolff and seen how championships are won. I still think Sainz to Red Bull was the obvious move. When you've got a team like Red Bull, Sergio Perez, who's not performing. Sainz couldn't leave Ferrari for this year, but for next year he's a free agent. And Red Bull, that's a known quantity of someone that is very good, going up against Charles Leclerc, who we all rate very highly, doing an admirable job. I don't think he'd be able to take the fight to Verstappen, but I think he'd be much closer. I think there's tension between those two, which probably has been the reason that Sainz isn't there. But if you're Red Bull, you think, actually, we've got to get the best driver we possibly can in that car, and I think that was Sainz.
Your facial expressions are telling me that Williams is a bit of a move for Carlos, but let's hear from him first and find out why he has chosen to join the historic team Williams Racing.
Well, I can tell you that I obviously analyze every possible option in the market, especially the most competitive ones. But then once I understood that I either had to wait very long, or or there was either not a strong possibility, I also want to be almost the boss of my own destiny. I wanted to take the decision myself rather than waiting too long for anything to happen, and Williams gave me the trust and the belief, and I believe in that, and I felt really encouraged by the project there, and really honestly motivated to see a team that wanted me so much, and about my clauses or where I can go one place or another, that I know it's been a topic today and people are asking me about it. I can only tell you that I'm fully committed to Williams for the future, and that whatever there is in my contract is nothing to discuss on microphones.
Andrew, Carlos sounds like he wants to give his all to Williams. People are chatting about perhaps some options in a contract that might allow him to go elsewhere in the short term as well. Do you think he's made the right decision going to Williams?
Well, I can see why he's made it, because the Audi Sauber project does not instill anybody in Formula One with confidence at the moment, and Alpine, goodness knows what's going on there, and those are basically his only other options. So the thing is, you were talking about pressure, Jolien. I think pressure is going to start coming on James Vowles and Williams before too long. At the moment, everyone's giving him plenty of rope to say, I've got my great plans. I knew we were going to take a step backwards this year because of trying to restructure the team and putting in place this new organisation and this new way of building the Formula One car, bringing it up to date. But he'll only be able to get away with that for so long. And now he's got a driver lineup in Sainz and Albon. Okay, it's not Verstappen and Hamilton, but they're two very, very solid drivers. And if that team doesn't move forward, then it's James Vowles who's going to start feeling the pressure.
And remember the start of this year, they couldn't even field two cars in Melbourne. And if you bench Logan Sargent, you get away with it. If you start benching Carlos Sainz or Alex Albon from a Grand Prix, you don't. So there's so much that Williams have got to catch up on, not least the performance of the car, but all the machining processes, the build and the design over the winter has to be good. And at least they've got a driver lineup that can make the most of it. And at least Alex Albon has someone that can push him to try and find the last 10th or 2 himself as well.
It's going to be a long journey, I think, for Williams, even so. Right, coming up, we'll hear from Zak Brown, the boss of McLaren. But first, let's get an update from Stamford Bridge, where Chelsea are in action against Serviette in the UEFA Conference League playoff. John Southall.
And Chelsea have just scored their second. Chelsea 2, Servette 0. The opening goal 5 minutes after half-time. Christopher Nkunku brought down by Jeremy Frick, the Servette goalkeeper. And Nkunku dispatched the penalty, his 4th Chelsea goal. Marc Guéhiou then missed an open goal. He had 3 bites at it. And then the decisive second, a couple of minutes ago, Noni Madueke smashed it in from the right of the area. And you would think that should be enough now for Chelsea in this tie. Chelsea 2, Servette 0.
Thanks, John. Just before we hear from the team boss of McLaren, Zak Brown, a couple of other headlines that we probably should cover. Peter Bonington, Bono, Lewis Hamilton's race engineer, he's confirmed that he is staying at Mercedes. He's going to become head of race engineering and not go to Maranello and Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton. End of a partnership, Andrew. It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Well, Hamilton's just been saying, actually, that he would have liked Peter Bonington to go to Ferrari with him, but he feels like he's like a brother to him, he says, but he understands why he wouldn't have wanted to go, because, you know, the disruption for Bonington and his partner. See, it sounds weird saying Bonington, Johnny, doesn't it? I should be calling him Bono. It feels like I should be calling him Bono, like everyone else does in Formula One. Anyway,
you're official though, and I like it.
Peter Bonington sounds very formal.
Yeah. So he didn't say. He said he understood, but and they'd always be close. So he's going to have a new race engineer next year, Lewis Hamilton, for the first time in 12 years.
That is going to be a really interesting dynamic to see. Does he just slot in with who's already engineering Carlos Sainz, or what goes on there? We know Charles Leclerc had a big engineering change this year too. That's going to be fascinating, how he threads into the life at Scuderia Ferrari. Is going to be one of the... We all thought we'd have to wait a whole year basically to get some juicy talking points, but now we're getting them now, and also looking ahead to see how Hamilton in his new era is going to be, in what will be his final foray in Formula One.
Imagine the job advert. Would you like to work with Lewis Hamilton, race engineer him? What qualities do you look for, Jolyon, in a race engineer? Should I throw my hat
what's
into the ring?
Tick list for a driver? Requirements for an engineer?
Setting a car up well, calming him when the tyres are at an unknown level towards the end of a race.
I'm out already. I've just taken my
you've got to have,
out.
As a race engineer, you need to be punchy, you need to be assertive. Obviously, you need to know your engineering of the car. You need to have great communication with the driver. And you've got to have respect both ways. Obviously, whoever's working with Lewis Hamilton next year will have respect for him. And it'll be a big job for them working with maybe the greatest driver ever to have lived. So that's a big job and a really great job. But then Lewis has got to respect them back and think that they're doing the right thing. Because when you're plugged into the car, you're doing a race, you get very little information. You're having to trust the pit wall so much. There is a strategist there, but the main guy that you're speaking to the whole way through is going to be your race engineer. You want the right information and you want it crisply.
What an opportunity for someone. Maybe it will be someone who's already at Ferrari. Maybe he'll take someone else from Mercedes that he's had his eye on. Who knows? One of the juniors in his team or something.
Will he learn Italian? That's my question.
Is that the biggest question?
He doesn't need to, because Ferrari operates in English.
In English, yeah. Maybe.
Always nice to dabble. In the lunch hall, you know, when he's ordering his pasta.
In the lunch hall. Well, he's not going to school. Oh, goodness me. Right, I've teased it enough. We can finally hear Andrew's extended interview with the boss of McLaren, Zak Brown. Zak took over the team back in 2016 when they were in serious trouble. And 8 years on, they are now, for some, the favourites to win the Constructors' title this year, which, as you'll hear, has even surprised Zak. They began their chat talking about what state the team was in when he took the reins.
It was worse than I thought it was. We were 9th in the championship. We had blank race cars, none that looked like that. I think 3 sponsors. We had upset fans. We had upset racing drivers. And we had a pretty down and out racing team. I didn't think it was as dire as it was. It was pretty kind of scary at the start because I think there had been many chiefs. You had Whitmarsh in, Ron in, Whitmarsh out, Whitmarsh back, Boulier in, Yost in, while Boulier's there. Like, it was just a revolving door at the top, kind of underneath that. You obviously had what was well documented as a shareholder dispute. So you kind of had what I said, no adult supervision. If things at the board aren't going well, then that just kind of rolls downhill. And so I came in needing to, I felt the first thing I could do would be is kind of repair the commercial side of the business, since that was something I was very comfortable with and knew that we had this awesome brand. But standing up in front of 1,000 employees who don't know you that well, when they've seen this kind of revolving door, was difficult because it's lonely at the top. So I had to start conveying my vision and mission for this great racing team. But you could look into the audience and not really be able to tell how many people were buying into my vision and mission in the early days, but we got there at the end.
But you'd never done anything like this before. I mean, you'd been a very successful businessman running a sponsorship acquisition company, but you'd never run a race team in this way, a Formula One team, certainly. So, what did you start with? How did you start?
Fortunately, I'd been around a lot of racing teams, but yeah, I'd never run one. But I'd been around Ron Dennis, I'd been around Bernie Ecclestone, I've been around Roger Penske, so I've been around some of the greatest people in the history of motorsport. So I at least felt like I had an idea, and I knew how to run business and understood motorsport, being a racer. And at my old company, we had 1,500 people, so the size wasn't overwhelming. But actually running a racing team was new to me. I felt because commercial was my background, I could quickly lean into that, start making a difference, and the team needed resources because we were losing a ton of money to be able to invest in drivers and technology and our people. So I felt that was the most comfortable place for me to start. I think I benefited from being a racer, so that gives you a little bit of street credibility, if you'd like, on the shop floor. At least people saw me as one of them, a racer, someone who had been around racing a long time. So I knew how to kind of speak the language. I think we've seen people come in from outside the sport and they make a statement, and you get an eye roll in the audience because it's like, oh, he just proved to us he knows nothing about this sport. So I think I hopefully avoided some of those mishaps, and then I went about putting in place the best leadership team that I believe I have in all of motorsports, because you can't do anything as an individual. All you can do is surround yourself with great people. So there isn't anyone on my leadership team today that was here in that leadership role when I started. And that wasn't something that was by design. I didn't come in going, I'm going to change the leadership team. I came in going, let me understand the business. And I kind of one by one realized the leadership team collectively wasn't what it needed to be to turn the team around. And I think that's the strength of McLaren today, is the leadership that's been able to be provided to a team that's won a lot of races and championships. They just needed better leadership than they'd been provided the last decade.
Andrea Stelli, he's the person who everybody's pointing at now as the biggest reason for the turnaround, and so are you. In fact, you said that yourself. You obviously put him in place. How soon did you identify him as a potential team boss, and why didn't it happen sooner? Because he's been here 10 years.
Yeah. Truth be known, I offered it to him the first time around, and he declined it. He felt he wasn't ready. I think Andrea is someone who knows his capabilities and doesn't kind of overreach. And so I actually spoke with him about it before we brought on the other team principal, and he felt he wasn't ready. So the second time around, I think he knew me better, knew the team better, even though he'd been here a while. And he still didn't say yes in the first phone call. It took a couple of days because he's very methodical, very thoughtful. He puts the team first. And so he was someone that I identified before, but he didn't feel he was ready. But when the opportunity came the second time, fortunately he did, and he's just done an unbelievable job.
How did he do it so quickly? Because it was, I mean, not a light switch, but in terms of Formula One, it was a light switch. You know, he comes in December, the first big upgrade package, the first result of his leadership, bang, you go from the back to the front. I mean, it doesn't happen in Formula One.
No,
so why
it was pretty awesome. I think what he did is he unlocked the talent that we already had here, because as I say, we got approximately 1,000 people in Formula One. I changed 3. So 997 are the same people that gave us the car at the beginning of 2023 that's given us the car that we have today. It just changed 3 people, but it was 3 leaders. And I think a leader's job is to get the most out of their people. And I think that's what we didn't have previously. I think we weren't able to let the talent we have in here flourish and let them do their thing. And so Andrea communicates very well. He listens very well. He's very hardworking. He's very technical. He leads by example, all the traits you would want from a great leader. And I think all he did, that's all he did. He did a lot, but I think he unlocked the potential this team clearly already had sitting here. But when you're a leader, you got to empower your people. You got to trust your people. You got to let them run. And I think that's what Andrea does, but he tells them which direction to run.
So you're now in a situation where no one would have thought you would be. I don't know.
Myself included.
Right. Yeah. Where you're competing for the Constructors' Championship and you're on a trajectory where actually if the results carry on in the way they are going at the moment, you will win the Constructors' Championship. How surprised are you that you're in that situation now?
I'm surprised. I think if I were to sit here and say I'm not surprised, that would be disingenuous. I obviously thought we would continue on this journey, but Red Bull had such an advantage over everyone, and Mercedes has been so dominant that I felt like we'd continue to close the gap. But did I think we would be here at the summer break, one race away? That race would have to be a first, a second, and a fastest lap. But, we're one race away from getting in the lead. Do I think it's going to happen next race like that? No. But as you said, if we keep on the same trajectory that we've been on the last 6-7 races, we'll be where we need to be by the end of the year. I think the drivers are doing a fantastic job. The technical team has clearly developed a great racing car. Andrea's leadership, our reliability is strong. Our relationship with HPP is great. And, what the commercial team is doing, our finance team, our people and culture, our comms, all that feeds into performance. So I think we're just firing on all cylinders, to use a racing pun. And we got here quicker than, I thought we might get where we are now by 25. I didn't think we would be where we are now in 24. But I'm not complaining.
Do you think you'll do it?
I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to come down to the last race. I think there's not much between the cars. I think it's going to come down to this, how does Sergio Perez perform? I think if he can perform in a way that he's capable of performing, I think it's going to be a hard fight. I think if he continues to perform as he's performed this year, I think we have a pretty good chance because we have 2 drivers that are constantly performing at the front. And you just don't know with Sergio, right? He turned it on in Spa and qualified really well, but then fell back in the race. But it wasn't long ago. He was, first start of the year, 2 years ago, on par with Max. So I think it would be a mistake to think he's going to stay where he is.
Now, you mentioned the drivers there. Lando Norris has let a couple of opportunities slip by, so have the team actually, but particularly Lando's made a couple of small errors, but often at the start when they've been happening. What do you think is going on there, and how concerned are you about that?
I'm not concerned. I think you're right. I think we're all have made a variety of errors, which to me are learning experiences. I thought Toto, I thought his comment was accurate. He said, well, sometimes you figure these things out once they've kind of been put on your plate. So if I look at some of the mistakes that we've made, whether those we or our drivers or us, kind of doesn't matter, we're one team, we wouldn't make those again. So we're learning, and I think maybe because we have got where we are quicker than we thought, it shows that we still have learning to, it's one thing to have fast car, fast pit stops, fast racing driver, but you got to execute everywhere. And even though these have been, to your point, small mistakes, when you're at the front of the field, a small mistake is the difference between winning and losing. I think we probably should have finished first and second in Silverstone. We didn't get it quite right. We finished third and fourth. The upside is we still scored more points than any team that weekend, but you don't like giving away a first and second and turning it into a third and fourth. But if we had Silverstone to do again, we wouldn't make that same mistake. So for me, it's all part of the learning. So I see the positive side in some of these. And I think Lando's trying to fight for a world championship. He's going for it. He's learning as we are. So I'm not concerned about it because I don't think we'll make these same mistakes again.
Now, you're in competition with Red Bull, but you've also made some personal comments about the Red Bull team principle over the years, over the cost cap, for example, and over some of the things that have been happening controversially this year. How would you characterise the relationship between the two teams and the different ways, and if you see them as different ways that you go about racing in Formula One?
Yeah, I've known Christian for about 25, 30 years. We used to race against each other. I would say we used to get on. Everyone's a competitor. I think everyone goes about their business in different ways. Some things are similar, some things are different. I believe in transparency. I believe in putting your hand up when you get something wrong. And these are things, whether it was the cost cap and the excuses behind that, I never really heard we just got it wrong. I heard excuses and not taking kind of ownership. Some of the conduct that you see is not what we stand for. And, I think we all have a responsibility not only to protect our brand, but to protect the sport and the integrity of the sport. And so when I see things like that in my opinion compromise the sport, things like the cost cap, look at how good it has made Formula One. Look at how great the racing is, the value creation for shareholders. So when someone breaches the cost cap and doesn't seem to kind of take it seriously, that's kind of hitting at the integrity and core of the sport. So I felt it was very important that we all take the cost cap very seriously. And that was year one. So it was like, are we going to get into a point where everyone plays around with the cost cap and makes excuses? Or are we going to take this thing seriously? Because it's a serious need for the sport to be healthy. So I spoke up against that. I spoke up when the cost cap was being developed. I thought it was too high initially. And, Matteo Binotto and I had some pretty healthy exchanges around what we thought the cost cap should be. So to me, it's not personal. It's protecting our sport. I feel that we all have a responsibility to be brand ambassadors. And, when DE&I and sustainability, things of this nature are really important to the sport. And I feel like things in our sport are not consistent with our values. I'm going to speak up about it because I think it's important that people understand where we're coming from. And I realize that's not necessarily always going to be popular or make friends with everyone in pit lane. But as long as I'm friends with McLaren, our fans, our partners, that's what's most important to me.
Now, one of the consequences of the controversy around Christian Horner this year has been that Red Bull have lost Adrian Newey, or they're about to lose Adrian Newey. Are you going to sign him?
We're not going to sign Adrian Newey. I'm very happy with the team. Adrian is a great friend, huge talent, resume, second to none. But I think with what team we have in place here, I couldn't be happier. I think we can get the job done, and I'm happy with the race team we have, and we're going to go try and win the World Championship with the team sitting here today. And what's your expectation for the final 10 races of the year? It's going to be a slugfest. I think it's going to be a slugfest between all four teams. I think as we saw in Spa, there's nothing between it. All 4 teams have won. 7 of the 8 drivers have won. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sergio Perez win a race this year. So I think you're going to see 4 teams, epic battles, 8 drivers that can show up at almost any racetrack and win, and it's going to be exciting.
Zach, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That was a fascinating chat, Andrew. I bet you enjoyed your sit down with Zak Brown. I think a lot of people have got overexcited about Andrea Stella, the team principal's role in turning the team around. But actually, Zach's been working quietly for some time, as we know, in the background to make it all happen, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say they got overexcited about Stella, because he has been absolutely instrumental. He's made a huge impact since he became team principal at the start of 2023. But of course, it was Zak Brown who put him in that job. It was Zak Brown who saw Stella's potential. And one of the interesting things that came out of that interview was that Brown had wanted Stella to be team principal before, when he appointed Andreas Seidl in 2019. But Stella didn't feel at that point that he was ready for it. Gave him another 2 or 3 years in his role as performance director, and he did feel ready for it, and how ready he's turned out to be.
I love that, though, to know your limits at the right time. I think that's really important.
I think, before we get on to Zak Brown, I think Andreas Stella is one of the most singularly impressive people in the entire Formula 1 paddock. He's incredibly eloquent. You could listen to him talk all day. He's obviously very bright. Fernando Alonso, for example, who persuaded McLaren to try and sign him when he left Ferrari to join McLaren at the end of 2014, obviously saw that, and he speaks very highly of him as well. But I think it speaks a lot for Zak Brown. He was a marketeer. He set up he became a millionaire with basically a sponsorship acquisition company. He did a load of deals around Formula 1 for a load of different teams, and then he got put in place at McLaren as the whole situation with Ron Dennis was falling apart with the board. And he had quite the job on his hands, because McLaren were in an absolute state. If you remember back in 2016, the Honda project was falling apart. They were one of the slowest cars on the grid. And it's taken him a few steps. They've changed engines twice. They've restructured the team a couple of times, but they've now really hit a golden streak. And fundamentally, that's down to Brown. So, yes, Stella deserves a lot of credit, but so does Zak Brown.
It's actually really incredible what they've done. When you think about it, they were sleeping giants, a little bit like Williams are at the moment, and you question, can Williams get back towards the front? And we spoke about their lineup. But McLaren in 2015, 16, 17, the big aplomb of reuniting with Honda, and they were right at the back. They were with Williams, slowest car for a year or so. And in some steps and some crucial hires, they've managed to be maybe the team to beat right now, and possibly Constructors' champions. The last time they did that was in 1998. So that shows how far they've come to being right at the front again.
So there's quite a bit going on off track, isn't there? We should probably get into the whole race preview thing of the Dutch Grand Prix.
That is also happening.
That is also happening. It is blustery, it is windy, we're right by the seaside, as I said. This track is old school. Do you get something in your eye?
Sand in my eye.
Oh, goodness. There might be a bit of sand out on track. It's tight, it's twisty, not too much overtaking. So can we get excited about this weekend?
It's tight and twisty, but there's some fast corners. There's some really interesting corners as well. The one at the back of the paddock, which is called Hugenholzbocht, was very steeply banked. It's a hairpin. We've seen Fernando Alonso do some crazy overtakes around there. One's around the outside, one's down the inside. Scheivlak out the back after that is incredibly fast downhill banked right-hander, and then you've got more high banking leading onto the pit straight. It is tight though, and it's narrow, and it is properly old school, and it's windy and rainy potentially on Saturday as well.
I think like Hugenholz, it's the fact you can take those different lines, especially in qualifying or in the race as well, and seeing lap one is always amazing to see how it goes. Qualifying, you're always on edge, easily to crash. There's gravel in the chicane in the final sector too, which always catches cars out. It's a good track.
I was so excited you were on the show, Joe, because I was like, I can ask him what it's like to drive here, and then I realised you've only been around this on a bicycle.
Yeah, I rode it. I was going to walk today. Went around a golf buggy.
So what's
Took
it like?
a late apex at turn 3. But it is a really cool track. It's one of those ones that I'm a bit gutted I didn't drive it, because it's a roller coaster of a circuit. Netherlands is meant to be the flattest country in the world, but it's in the dunes. It's actually really undulating. There's a load of blind crests, and the barriers are not far away at all. There's gravel lining the circuit. There's no tarmac runoffs. It's a proper driver's circuit.
And whilst Max Verstappen has been utterly dominant here over the past 3 years, pole and the win each time we've visited here since 2021, fair to say it's anyone's this weekend?
Not anyone's, but anyone out of McLaren, Verstappen and Mercedes drivers. Ferrari don't have an upgrade. I don't think they're going to be quite competitive enough. And obviously Perez, well, as we've said, he's in trouble.
This is the beginning of Perez's scoring until he might well get ousted. Verstappen's 200th Grand Prix this weekend. He said he's not going to do another 200, but 200 GPs. I mean, you've got to look at Verstappen based on the history and reinvigorated after the summer break. But I think we can't call it right now, which is, we can have an idea, but I don't think we can call it.
I'm going to stop you right there because I think that's a nice way to finish. We can't call it. That is what I'm loving about 2024. Guys, thank you very much. Harry Benjamin, Andrew Benson and Jolyon Palmer. You can listen to the race via the BBC Sport website and your smart speaker of choice on Sunday afternoon. Our coverage begins at 1:45. We're back tomorrow for the 2 practice sessions. Can Max Verstappen finally get back to winning ways in front of his home crowd on his 200th Grand Prix race weekend? This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Next up, it's Gordon Smart. But first, let's get the latest BBC News.